Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wondered if you could, supercharge your morning coffee to maybe burn more fat?
It's a popular idea, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this dashing health video making the rounds, titled 6 Plants That Turn Your Morning Coffee into a Fat Burner. It lists things like chlorogenic acid, Camellia sinensis, chromium, a few others.
Right, L-carnitine, L-theanine, and a vitamin complex, I believe.
That's the one. So we've gathered some actual scientific studies here, and the goal today is really to see what the research actually says about these ingredients, in the context of coffee. You're here because you want the real scoop efficiently. So let's get into it. Coffee itself has bioactive compounds, we know that. But can adding these extra plant bits really make it a fat-burning machine?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Combining these things, does it work? We need to look at the evidence carefully.
Okay, let's start with the first one they mentioned. Chlorogenic acid, CGA. This seemed like a big focus in the video. We have a 2023 review from Systematic Reviews that looked specifically at this and body weight. What did it find?
Well, the first thing to know is that green coffee beans before roasting are packed with these chlorogenic acids, CGAs. Also, caffeine and caffeic acid.
Okay.
And this review mentions there's a belief, and some early human studies hint at it, that green bean coffee might help with insulin resistance and obesity risk. Plus, it could have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects too.
So, potentially more going on than just weight.
Potentially, yes. But regarding fat burning specifically, the review looked at mouse studies.
Ah, the mice. What happened there?
In mice, CGA seemed to show anti-diabetic, anti-lipidemic, so effects against high fats and anti-obesity effects. It looks like it might regulate how the body uses glucose and lipids, maybe even block some fat absorption. Some studies even showed reduced body weight and fat deposition in mice, possibly linked to certain molecules involved in energy expenditure like PGC1 and UCP1.
Okay, interesting in mice. But how does that translate to humans putting something in their coffee?
Exactly, that's the crucial jump. Now, a 2019 study suggested CGA seems pretty safe for use in pharmaceuticals. But the meta-analysis itself, the systematic reviews one, when they searched all the big databases, Stopus, Embase, PubMed, Cochrane, they actually found very few human studies that met their specific criteria for looking at body weight effects.
No, it's only a few.
Yeah, surprisingly few. I think it was only 3 full-text articles made it into their final meta-analysis on body weight.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty significant limitation then for human evidence.
It really is. It highlights we need more good human trials. The review did mention a tiny dose of green coffee extract seemed to help regulate weight gain in mice on a high-fat diet, and they sort of estimated a human equivalent, roughly 1,460 milligrams for a 60-kilogram person.
Which is quite a bit.
It is. Separately, they pointed to some other human studies, not part of the main meta-analysis, where people took green coffee, maybe 200 to 1,000 milligrams a day for 1 to 8 weeks, and saw some weight reduction. And there was one 12-week human study using 500 milligrams of a specific CGA type, which seemed safe, but again, small sample size, short duration. So you see these hints, but it's not conclusive from that review.
Got it. So hints, but not solid proof from that big review. Now, the Dashing Health video specifically talks about CGA turning coffee into a fat burner.
Did our second study, the 2024 one in nutrients, give us anything clearer on coffee itself?
Yes, this one's quite relevant. It didn't look at green bean extract, but at actual coffee, specifically coffee naturally rich in phenolic compounds, including CGAs. They compared a regular roasted coffee to a lightly roasted coffee in people who were overweight or obese.
And why lightly roasted?
Because the lighter roast preserves more of these compounds. The lightly roasted coffee, the LRC, had about 400 milligrams of these hydroxycinnamic acids, including CGA, per cup. The regular roast, RC, only had around 150 milligrams per cup.
Big difference.
Huge difference. Caffeine was also different, higher in the light roast too, about 130 milligrams versus 70 milligrams per cup.
Okay, so how did they test this? They did a crossover trial with 60 people. That means everyone drank 3 cups a day of one type of coffee for 12 weeks. Had a break, a washout period, and then switched to the other coffee for 12 weeks.
Smart. So you compare each person against themselves.
Exactly. And they tracked body composition, metabolic markers, the whole lot.
And the results.
Yeah.
What happened when they compared the high CGA light roast to the regular roast?
This is where it gets interesting. Both coffees actually led to a decrease in fat mass and body fat percentage, and muscle mass slightly increased with both too.
Oh, okay. So coffee itself maybe helped.
Seems like it, but, and this is the key part, the The decrease in body fat percentage was significantly greater with the lightly roasted coffee, the one with much more chlorogenic acid. People drinking the light roast were getting around 1,200 milligrams of these phenolic acids, including CGA, per day, compared to maybe 450 milligrams with the regular roast. Body weight itself didn't change much, nor did metabolic syndrome variables.
But the fat percentage did, more with the high CGA coffee.
Precisely. The researchers suggested this higher CGA intake might well be the reason for that better fat reduction. They even saw a trend towards less visceral fat, that's the belly fat around organs with the light roast.
Okay, that's probably the strongest evidence we've seen so far for CGA in coffee, potentially helping with fat reduction, especially if it's lightly roasted.
It definitely points in that direction, yes. Higher dose seems potentially beneficial.
All right, now the Dashing Health video also listed Camellia sinensis. That's green tea, right?
Correct, that's the plant green tea comes from.
So what did our studies say about adding green tea or its compounds to coffee?
Well, this is where we hit a bit of a wall with the specific studies we have. The systematic reviews paper was all about green bean coffee, not Camellia sinensis.
Right, different plant.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And the nutrients study, the one comparing the roasted coffees, they actually told participants not to drink other herbal teas or infusions during the study.
So they actively excluded it.
Exactly. They wanted to isolate the coffee effect. So while, green tea and its catechins are often talked about for weight management, these specific studies didn't examine combining it with coffee.
Okay, so no direct evidence here for the Camellia sinensis and coffee combo. What about the others on the list? Chromium, L-carnitine, L-theanine, and that vitamin complex.
Yeah, same situation for those, unfortunately. Neither the green bean coffee review nor the roasted coffee comparison study investigated adding chromium, L-theanine, carnitine, or vitamins to coffee for fat burning. They just weren't part of the research focus.
So for those specific additions to coffee, these papers give us nothing.
Pretty much, yeah. No data from these sources. However, we do have one other study here that looked at L-carnitine, but in a completely different context.
Oh.
Tell me about that. It's a 2016 study from the International Journal of Pediatrics. They looked at caffeine and carnitine supplementation together in teenage male soccer players. Importantly, this had nothing to do with coffee.
Okay, teen athletes, what do they do?
They had 31 teen boys split into 3 groups for 6 weeks. One got caffeine plus a placebo drink, another got caffeine plus 2 grams of L-carnitine, and the third group just got the placebo drink. The caffeine dose was 6 milligrams per kilograms of body weight per day, and they all kept up their soccer training.
And what happened? Did the carnitine make a difference with the caffeine?
It seemed to. The group that got both caffeine and carnitine showed a significant loss of body weight and, importantly, body fat percentage compared to the caffeine-only group and the placebo group.
Really? That's quite specific.
It was a notable finding. Interestingly, things like leptin levels and most cholesterol markers didn't change much, although triglycerides did decrease in that caffeine-carnitine group.
Any other effects?
Yeah, they saw free fatty acids go up in the caffeine-only group, maybe indicating fat breakdown. But also, fasting blood sugar went up significantly in both groups that got caffeine.
Okay, so potential downsides too. But the researchers thought caffeine and carnitine worked together.
They suggested a potential synergy, yes. That the combination might enhance lipolysis, fat breakdown, and fat oxidation, using fat for energy.
So this study suggests caffeine plus carnitine might help fat loss, at least in exercising teens. But, and this is a big but,
it's absolutely crucial to stress this was not about coffee. It was supplemental caffeine and carnitine in active teenagers. We can't just assume dumping L-carnitine powder into your morning brew will replicate these results. The dose, the population, the context, all different.
Right. Very important distinction. Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. Based on the science we've actually looked at, what's the verdict on these 6 ingredients turning coffee into a fat burner, like the video claims?
Well, synthesizing it. Chlorogenic acid, particularly the higher amounts you get in lightly roasted coffee, does show some potential for helping reduce body fat based on that nutrient study. That seems the most promising link within coffee.
Okay.
Then we have the caffeine and carnitine combination, which showed weight and fat loss benefits in that study of exercising teens, but again, completely separate from coffee. Right. And for chromium, L-theanine, Camellia sinensis, green tea, and a general vitamin complex. Our specific sources just didn't provide evidence about their effects when combined with coffee for fat burning.
So it sounds like the Dashing Health video And maybe the Java Burn product it promotes, which contains all 6, might be taking findings about individual ingredients, sometimes from contexts outside of coffee.
And combining them into one concept. Yeah, that's often how these things work. There might be some rationale for each ingredient individually somewhere in the literature, like the carnitine study or general green tea research. But the evidence for them working together, specifically in coffee, to produce a significant fat-burning effect wasn't really found in the studies we examined today.
Weight management is complex, isn't it?
Absolutely. It involves diet, exercise, genetics, hormones. It's very rarely just about adding one magic ingredient to your coffee, unfortunately.
So, for you listening, the big takeaway seems to be approach these claims with, let's say, a healthy dose of critical thinking. There's some science suggesting CGA in coffee, especially light roast, might help with fat reduction. And maybe caffeine plus carnitine has potential in active people, though not necessarily in coffee based on this research. But the idea that this specific 6-ingredient cocktail in your coffee is a guaranteed fat burner, the direct evidence we reviewed just isn't there.
Exactly. Be critical. Look at the actual studies. What did they test? Who did they test it on? Was coffee even involved? The science behind multi-ingredient formulas needs careful scrutiny. How do these things interact? We often don't know.
This has been super clarifying, actually. For me, the finding about the lightly roasted coffee and higher CGA being linked to better fat reduction was pretty compelling compared to the lack of direct evidence for the others in coffee. What about you? What stood out or maybe surprised you today? Perhaps you're now wondering more about, say, how much CGA is really needed or how that caffeine carnitine thing works differently in sedentary adults versus teen athletes. Lots to think about.
Always more questions to ask.
Indeed. Thanks for digging into the science with us on the Deep Dive.